Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Shanti in Place, our weekly meditation gathering. Welcome if you're joining us on Zoom. We have some participants still making their way into the Zoom room. And welcome if you're also joining us on YouTube, either through the live stream or watching this recording later. As we generally do, let's just take a moment or two to find that comfortable, easeful posture or seat, that sukhasana, that seat of comfort, of relaxation, and also of alertness and presence. Perhaps more intentionally planting ourselves firmly onto the ground or the chair that we might be sitting in, connecting our sit bones to the surface beneath us, or grounding our feet or shoes more firmly against the floor. An invitation here to close the eyes if we haven't already done so, or if it feels more accessible and safe to us, to simply soften the gaze. We'll begin our meditation as we generally do with the ringing of the bell, and then taking 3 deep breaths together. We'll breathe in deeply through the nostrils or softly between the lips for about 4 beats. We'll hold the breath for about 4 beats, and then we'll exhale, letting the breath out for slightly longer, perhaps 6 or 7 beats. These are general guidelines. You're also welcome to modify and to do whatever feels more accessible and comfortable to you. The idea, of course, being that we want to begin our practice by grounding ourselves in the present moment through deep intentional breathing. We'll begin. Breathing in deeply. Hold. And out. In. Hold. And out. In. Holding. Release. Continuing to breathe with intention, and allowing the breath to find its own natural rhythm or pace. noticing the breath as it settles into itself. Bringing our awareness, our observation to the breath, to its rhythm. Noticing any sensations that might be accompanying the breath. This breath, this simple, wonderful cycle of breathing life in and letting go. This breath is our anchor. It's our foundation. It's our resting place. If we feel our thoughts starting to wander or our awareness becoming splayed, distracted, we can simply bring this awareness back to the breath. Just letting it rest on the breath. When we're noticing the breath, we're bringing our attention and our awareness to this moment. Each breath we take exists in the present moment. No two breaths are identical. This breath in this moment is unique. It's irreplaceable. Simply by noticing it, we are present. We don't have to think of anything. We don't have to imagine anything. We don't really even have to do anything. We just are. When we notice this breath, we are in this moment. Bringing the mind back to the breath, to this moment. From wherever it may be wandering. We can continue to simply notice or observe the breath, or if we'd like to, even as we continue to notice the breath, we can intentionally and slowly guide our awareness to the heart space, to the center or core of our feeling. Observing just for a moment how we're feeling without judgment. without analysis. Simply observing whatever feeling is there right now. In these final moments of our meditation sit, with our awareness resting on the breath and resting on our feelings. Perhaps here we can allow an intention, a sankalpa, to form, to articulate. Perhaps a response to this simple question: how will I fill myself with joy today? How will I fill myself with joy today? How will I fill myself with joy today? Staying in this present moment, resting on the breath. We will seal our practice as we usually do, with one final deep breath in and the chanting or hearing of the sound vibration Om as we exhale. Breathing in deeply. Om. Gently and in a way that's comfortable to us, an invitation here to open the eyes or widen the gaze, to bring our awareness back to our external surroundings and to our virtual gathering. Thank you again for joining us. I'm going to share my screen so we can have a very short wisdom teaching or reflection, we can say. Our reflection for today has to do with this idea of filling ourselves with joy, allowing ourselves to experience that which nourishes and sustains us, that which fills us up. Sometimes our spiritual or meditation practices can feel like fasting. And so, once again, we reflect on this dynamic of fasting and feasting. Our reflection for today reads, when we understand our spiritual practice as more of a feast than a fast, we are able to experience a higher taste that helps us to remain steady and content in all circumstances. This idea of a feast. Now, in many traditions the world over, there is, for good reason, emphasis on fasting, on withdrawing from the experience of either in the physical sense, the literal sense of eating, or of partaking of the experience of the senses. So that withdrawal is very important, but equally important, although not as often discussed, is this idea of feasting, rather, both in the literal sense of feasting on foodstuffs, but also feasting on that which nourishes us spiritually. This dynamic of fasting and feasting is spoken of in the Bhagavad Gita, in the second chapter. Sri Krishna says, Yada vishaya vinivartante niraharasya dehinaha rasavarjam rasopyasya param drishtva nivartate. As embodied beings, dehina, we may restrain the senses while fasting, but the underlying taste for the objects of our craving remains. However, by experiencing a higher taste, we are able to give it up with ease. So in other words, fasting has its place, but fasting doesn't necessarily address the underlying taste for the object of our craving, right? The underlying issue of cravings, that remains unaddressed. But when we address on the deeper level that which positively sustains us in our spiritual practice and our spiritual lives, then we're able to actually experience that higher taste. And then those things which perhaps are not so good for our spiritual practices, we're able to give them up with ease. So fasting has its place, whether it's fasting in the sense of temporarily embracing some voluntary austerity, like there are certain days of the year or on the calendar, or even maybe in our week, if we have a practice of fasting weekly, where we understand we embrace temporarily some voluntary austerity. It doesn't mean that we have to fast all the time, but we set some time for ourselves and we say, no, I'm going to strengthen my resolve and strengthen my sense of self-discipline by accepting a temporary fast. Or we might look at fasting in terms of in more longer term, where we address certain bad habits, certain things that are perhaps not conducive to our spiritual growth or our inner growth, our emotional growth. And we say, no, I'd like to actually make a resolve. Like at certain times of the year, we might have a resolution and we might say, from this point on, I'd like to actually cut this destructive or distracting element of my life. I'd like to cut it out. So we address our bad habits or toxicity in our lives in this way through a kind of a longer term fasting. I'm no longer going to partake in this particular activity or this pattern of behavior. So that fasting is important, but equally important, and according to the verse that we just read in the Bhagavad Gita, in one sense even more important, is identifying what is that higher taste that I would like to experience in my life. Where am I getting that deeper sense of nourishment and sustenance? What nourishes and sustains me? We should ask ourselves this question: what nourishes and sustains us in our spiritual life? If it's all about fasting, if it's all about cutting things out, if it's all about letting go and detaching ourselves from things, then our practice can become incredibly dry. And that, as the verse reminds us, the underlying issue, that the underlying craving may still manifest itself in various ways. But we need to ask ourselves, what am I going to replace? When I perform a fast, I'm detaching myself from certain things, either temporarily or in a more permanent way. But what am I replacing that with? What is the positive that is filling that space? What nourishes and sustains me? What fills me with joy? We can ask ourselves that, as we did in this meditation, on a daily level. What fills me with joy today? We can also ask ourselves that, taking a wider perspective. What is that thing, or what are those things in my practice, in my life, that fill me with real joy beyond the flickering pleasure and pain of this world? What is it that fills me with joy? And in that sense, we can also ask ourselves, what makes it all worth it? Right? Why do I come to a meditation practice or a yoga practice or whatever our practice may be? What makes it all worth it? What holds that space for me in the positive way, that allows me to undergo whatever temporary austerity or discomfort may be there, whatever that stretch is for me? What makes it all worth it in the end? When we understand our spiritual practice as more of a feast than a fast, we are able to experience a higher taste that helps us to remain steady and content in all circumstances and purposes. So that's our reflection for today. I want to thank you all for joining and for meditating together, for giving ourselves the gift of this time, this space, this opportunity to connect with one another and with ourselves, our deeper selves, our truest selves. So thank you all so much. Please continue to join us throughout the academic year. We gather together virtually on Tuesdays at 12 noon Eastern time. So please continue to join us if you're able to. And we look forward to meditating with you and seeing you next week. Have a wonderful rest of your day and rest of your week. Namaste. Thank you.